This assignment here is to look at African explorers and departure zones. And the main focus for this particular assignment is going to be to have an understanding of the terms that are going to be addressed in this PowerPoint. You're going to see some of the sources from the AP framework. You can use this chart here where you see the source name and you want to try to have a definition as well as the possible significance of the image or the source. For today's class, you're going to be using this chart, blank sheet of paper, and you'll see task on the slide. And then that task is going to direct you to place that information in one of these boxes. The themes addressed are primarily this one here. And we're going to first start out with the conquistadors. And really what we're looking at here is trying to figure out at what point do Africans become permanent involuntary slaves as well as their children, which is what the H is for, hereditary, permanent involuntary hereditary servitude. Here this timeline, we're looking at some of the conquistadors. These are the people who are coming over from Spain, Portugal, and they're coming into the Americas, and they're just on a mission of conquest, plunder for resources, and so on. But they are going to bring Africans with them, and again, that's the main focus here for this particular class. Here we see some terms. Latinos, part of a generation known as Atlantic Creoles, and then Atlantic Creoles, Africans who worked as intermediaries before the predominance of chattel slavery. And again, that's a reference to permanent involuntary hereditary servitude. So this is going to give you a couple of examples of people who came over with some of these conquistadors who were either slaves but not permanent slaves. You know, the European system was a little different than the American system where it was permanent. And that seems to be the main focus here. So we're going to first start out with this individual, Juan Garrido, who is a Spanish expeditionary, and he's coming along with the conquistadors. And in this image here, you know, you want to analyze it, and we see him here. We see the conquistadors here, and then the indigenous people. And that's what seems to be going on here. It says that he maintained his freedom by serving in the Spanish military forces, and he participated in efforts of conquest. This is in the 1500s. Here we see these conquistadors. Here we see him. And then when we get to the next slide, this is a petition to the king. And this is the task where you want to develop a conclusion. I'll give you a quick hint. He's asking for something up here, and whatever he's asking for, he's claiming he's justified as a result of engaging in these particular activities. We're going to move on to another individual, Esteban, and keep in mind, the main goal here is to have this understanding that the first Africans coming to this new world are not permanent involuntary slaves, nor their children. This is a process that's going to develop in the United States. As far as this individual, we see the area that he's traveling to, and then it says that he was eventually killed while resisting Spanish colonialism. He's not resisting it. It's the indigenous population that he's fighting against. And on this chart, you see some of those, the names, not all are included in this slideshow, where they were born, their conquest activity, and again, the significance is that the first Africans were not always slaves. For this timeline, this is primarily about the American system, and what we see here is, according to this timeline, that the first 20 blacks were indentured servants. If they're indentured servants, that means that they're going to be free. Later on, we'll be looking at this timeline, these slave codes that eventually take the status of indentured servitude and make, in the United States system of slavery, permanent involuntary slaves as well as the children, hence the H, hereditary. Here we have some images that are required. It's looking at the amount of people who are coming over from Africa and their locations. Pretty self-explanatory. We see some data, some figures here, where they're going, where they're coming from. This is a zoomed in version. And now we want to compare the two maps. This was a map from Unit 1 that was looking at some of those African empires. And remember, this is the coast, and that's the whole point here, that the coast is where this slave trade really is coming from. People are being moved from the interior out to the coasts. It's just another image. Here we have yet another task. How and why will different African groups change their new environments? And it's really a question about any group moving at any particular point. When they get to their destination, they're going to bring their religion, their culture, their way of life, and it's going to bring up this point of assimilation. Here we see yet a similar map, but with this map, we're looking at the percentages from these particular regions. And that's what that section right there is about. When you click this link, you're going to see these dots, and these dots are to represent people. It starts in the 1400s, ends around mid 1800s, and for the most part, you're going to see most of these dots going in these areas, and that seems to be the point of the prior slide and some of the images. Keep in mind, when we're talking about the slave trade, we're talking about a three-phase of enslavement. You're first going to be captured from the interior, sent to the coast, and then the middle passage would be the journey to your destination, and then the sale. And that is going to be the focus when we get to the institution of slavery in the Americas. Also keep in mind with this triangle trade that as people are leaving, you also have goods that are coming in. So you might have, as it's telling you here, textile, rum, manufactured goods are going to Africa. And that was something that was addressed before, that some of the stronger African tribes that have moved people to the coast are participating in the slave trade. So it's not just a European issue. You also have Africans participating in the transatlantic slave trade, which is what this image here is showing you. It's looking at that particular process of Africans enslaving Africans and then marching them to the coast. What this image is trying to also address, the devices that would be used. Keep in mind that this is a device that's developed to try to maintain profit, and that's the way they're looking at slavery. This is about profit, and this device is designed to maximize profit. It's another image. This is an image of possibly the final door one would see. As they exit that door, they possibly are going to board a slave ship. If you click this link here, it'll take you to an image of Obama visiting, and it just has to be a pretty bizarre experience to have no idea what's going to be the end results once you leave that door and you get on that ship. It says here about 15% of captives perished during the Middle Passage. Here we have an interior shot of the slave ship. Notice that we do have levels. For example, this one you don't have anybody on in the middle because that's actually this tier here, and then this would be this section. There might be a difference between loose or tight packing. When you bring more slaves, you run the risk of more dying because of the cramped conditions. Here we have some lyrics from a 90s rap song that's addressing this particular point. And the line here, rolling in my own leftover, this small cramped area where you're just there, not even considered a human. You're nothing but cargo. At some point, you would see some slaves make the horrible decision to just jump in the water, commit suicide, which would lead to a situation where the slave ship owners are going to have to figure out a way to kind of deal with this, because they're not looking at these individuals as human beings. They're looking at these individuals as a loss of profit. Here we have some more paintings. Image from the AP framework. And what's going on here is we're looking at almost a manifest, a shipment documenting, the amount, that the number of the person, the human being, and then the end result. And for the most part, we see died, died, died. So we're looking at a registration number for human beings and documenting the fact that the individual did not make it, that the human being perished during the Middle Passage. As far as slave stories go, here we have another document that you are going to have to become familiar with. And the task here is to analyze the source. And this is a first-hand account of what to expect, or what this slave encountered. And so the expectation here is you're going to have some understanding about this particular document. We have the same source, different excerpt. This is excerpt 2. Now we have a poem that you need to analyze that is trying to document the slave experience from the point of view of the human being. Final task, now that you've read some of the primary source documents, you're going to create your own poem, description, drawing, or some other form of artistic expression. We're trying to address this theme here, but you're in the position to create the final product. And then we have this sheet here, which is addressing some of the terms that were used. For example, we address Creole, transatlantic slave trade, the 3 phases of the process, the coastal states, slave narratives, which are the written or oral account of slavery from a first-hand experience. The one I probably didn't really address was the economics of slavery, and this is really just looking at slavery from the point of view of economics, where you're not looking at slavery or these human beings as just that, human beings. They're nothing more than cargo, and that's significant because that's going to determine ultimately how many are going to be enslaved, because if there's no need, there's no profit incentive, there's no need to enslave human beings.